The glass tower shimmered under the Shanghai skyline, its mirrored walls catching the morning sun. Inside the top-floor conference room, tension rippled through the air thick with perfume, arrogance, and money. At the head of the table sat Amara Johnson, the 38-year-old CEO of Novagen Technologies, an American renewable energy firm on the brink of a historic partnership. Her tailored navy suit and calm demeanor concealed the storm of nerves inside her chest. Across from her were the representatives of Shenzhou Capital, China's largest private investment group, the final piece in a $700 million global expansion deal. For 3 months, her team had worked day and night, smoothing every detail, aligning every figure. This deal would not only redefine Novagen's future but mark a new era in international clean energy cooperation. But as the meeting began, Amara noticed the looks. They weren't subtle, the glances exchanged between the interpreters, the raised brows, the faint smirks. Her chief financial officer, Mark Patel, continued explaining the financial projections, unaware of the whispers being traded in Mandarin. One of the younger investors chuckled quietly. Another leaned toward his colleague and said, in Chinese, a servant running the company? No wonder they need our help. The interpreter hesitated, his face pale, before skipping the line. But Amara understood Mandarin. She had learned it years ago, long before Novagen existed. Her heart froze, then began to pound. She didn't react. Not yet. She watched as they continued, their tone dripping with false politeness, their eyes avoiding hers whenever she spoke. To them, she wasn't a CEO. She was an anomaly, a black woman at the top of a billion-dollar company. When the meeting adjourned for lunch, Amara excused herself. She stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in the cold Shanghai air. Below her, the city pulsed with life, millions of people chasing dreams, building empires. She thought of her grandmother, who had once scrubbed floors in Alabama, saying, "Don't let anyone buy your silence, baby. Not even for $1 billion." And Amara smiled, a quiet, dangerous smile. When she returned to the room, the men were laughing, glasses of champagne ready to toast what they assumed was a done deal. Amara sat down slowly, opened her tablet, and projected the signed documents on the wall. "Gentlemen," she said, voice calm as steel, "before we finalize, I'd like to make one clarification." The laughter dimmed. She switched the display to a translation transcript of the meeting, every Mandarin phrase, perfectly translated. Including the insult. Silence crashed through the room. "I speak your language," she continued. "I also understand respect, or the lack of it. Novagen was looking for partners, not masters. This meeting is over." The room erupted, voices rising in panic, apologies tumbling over one another. The lead investor, pale with shock, begged her to reconsider, but Amara stood, gathered her documents, and walked to the door. "Gentlemen," she said, turning back one last time, "you didn't just lose a deal. You lost an era." 2 weeks later, the story broke in the Wall Street Journal. Chinese investors called Black CEO servant. She canceled the $700 million deal. Social media exploded. Within days, Novagen's valuation rose, not fell, as ethical investors and global partners rushed to align with Amara's integrity. When asked by a reporter if she regretted the decision, Amara smiled slightly and said, "Respect is not negotiable. And neither is dignity." The city of San Francisco buzzed outside Novagen's headquarters, where the wind carried whispers of both admiration and doubt. It had been 12 days since Amara Johnson canceled the $700 million deal, and the world hadn't stopped talking. Some called her a hero, others called her reckless. TV panels debated her decision every night. Hashtags trended globally, hashtag stand with Amara, hashtag 700 million mistake, hashtag dignity over dollars. But inside her office, silence ruled. The glass walls reflected a woman who looked composed but exhausted, dark circles beneath her eyes, her posture rigid. On her desk, stacks of reports from investors, journalists, and legal advisors formed an invisible fortress around her. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ma'am, the board meeting starts in 10. Amara nodded without looking up as she knew what awaited her inside that room, not applause, but fire. "Amara, with all due respect," said Robert Klein, the chairman of Novagen's board, "you didn't just cancel a deal. You jeopardized the future of this company." The room buzzed with low murmurs. Amara looked up slowly. "I protected its soul." Robert slammed his pen down. "Soul doesn't pay salaries. We lost $700 million in funding." She leaned forward, her voice calm but unwavering. "Then maybe we find investors who don't think I should be cleaning their offices instead of running one." The silence that followed was sharp as glass. A young board member, a woman named Priya Malhotra, the company's sustainability director, spoke softly. "She's right. If we compromise our values for money, we've already sold the company, just not on paper." Robert exhaled heavily. "Values don't keep the lights on, Priya." Amara closed her laptop and stood. "No, but they make sure the lights we turn on actually mean something." She walked out, leaving the board stunned. That night, her phone buzzed non-stop, journalists demanding interviews, bloggers twisting her words, stock analysts predicting doom, even her mother called, voice trembling, baby, did you really walk away from $700 million? Amara sighed. Yes, Mama. A pause. Then her mother whispered, good. I raised you better than to sell your pride. Tears filled Amara's eyes, the first in days. 3 weeks later, something extraordinary happened. Emails started pouring in, not from billionaires, but from believers. An African energy startup in Kenya offered collaboration. A Scandinavian Green Fund pledged $100 million in ethical investment. And then came the call that changed everything, from Aurora Capital, a European consortium known for its transparent, diversity-driven partnerships. We read your story, their director said. We don't want to buy your company. We want to build with it. By the end of that week, Novagen had secured $850 million in new funding, on their own terms. At a global summit in Geneva, Amara stood on stage, calm, radiant, unstoppable. Behind her, a massive screen displayed Novagen's new slogan, Clean Energy. Clean Conscience. She took the mic and said, when I walked away from $700 million, I wasn't rejecting money. I was rejecting the idea that power comes from wealth. It doesn't. It comes from choice. The audience rose in applause, world leaders, activists, journalists, young entrepreneurs. In that moment, she wasn't just a CEO, she was a symbol of what leadership looks like when the world forgets what integrity means. Months later, Amara stood again on a balcony, this time overlooking Nairobi, where Novagen's first African solar grid shone across thousands of homes. Her assistant joined her quietly. Do you ever regret walking away? Amara smiled faintly, watching the golden panels reflect the setting sun. Every time I see light that doesn't come from greed, she said, I remember why I did it. 6 months had passed since Amara Johnson walked away from the $700 million deal. Novagen's new global project in Kenya had become a worldwide symbol of ethical power, clean energy built on clean values. But far away, in a skyscraper in Beijing, a different kind of power was plotting. Inside a dark boardroom, the men from Shenzhou Capital sat in silence, the memory of humiliation burning in their minds. Their leader, Chairman Wu Zhen, broke the silence at last. She made us look weak, he said softly. In front of the world. A younger executive replied, we could buy the media. Control the story. Wu's eyes narrowed. No. We destroy her quietly. Not her name, her company. It began with whispers, false reports online claiming Novagen's African project was under investigation for labor violations. Then came hacked emails, altered spreadsheets, and leaked documents showing fabricated corruption. Within weeks, news outlets across Asia and Europe were buzzing with controversy. Novagen's integrity questioned. Amara Johnson under fire. Was the $850 million deal a front? Investors panicked. Stock prices dipped. Anonymous threats filled Amara's inbox. Her legal advisor, Sarah Dubé, threw a folder onto her desk. These aren't random leaks, Amara. Someone's funding a coordinated attack. Amara looked up, eyes tired but sharp. Then we find out who. Amara flew to Geneva to meet Aurora Capital's security director, a former intelligence officer named Lucas Brandt. He handed her a dossier. We traced the IP origins. 3 of them lead back to a server farm outside Shenzhen. Shenzhou Capital, she asked. Lucas nodded. They're using offshore accounts to fund disinformation. They're trying to bury you before your African grid launches publicly. Amara exhaled slowly. So this isn't about money anymore. Lucas replied, no. It's about pride. You wounded an empire. That night, in her hotel room, Amara sat alone, lights dim, rain tapping the glass. For the first time, doubt crept in. Was it worth it? The sleepless nights, the endless scrutiny, the loneliness of standing alone against giants. She opened her laptop, scrolling through social media. Between hate comments and fake news, she found one video, a short clip from a Kenyan child, standing under the new solar lights Novagen had built. The boy smiled into the camera and said, now I can read at night. Amara closed her eyes, tears streaming down silently. She whispered, yes. It was worth it. 3 days later, Amara called a press conference in London. Journalists from around the world packed the hall, cameras flashing like lightning. She stepped up to the podium, no notes, no teleprompter. Just truth. I know what's being said, she began. That Novagen is corrupt. That our values are fake. That I should have bowed to money in silence. But I will not. The crowd hushed. Our servers were hacked. Our data was stolen. But you cannot steal integrity, you cannot counterfeit truth. We will not be intimidated by those who mistake fear for power. She revealed evidence, screenshots, digital trails, financial links, directly tying the attacks to Shenzhou Capital's network. IT was a bombshell. Within 24 hours, international regulators launched a full investigation. A month later, global headlines screamed, Chinese firm under investigation for cyber attacks on U.S. energy company. Shenzhou Capital's reputation collapsed overnight. Chairman Wu resigned. Arrests followed, and in one final act of poetic justice, Novagen's new valuation crossed $1.2 billion, the highest in its history. Back in Nairobi, Amara stood again at the solar grid site, now expanded across 6 cities. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing against rows of shining panels. Her assistant approached. "The world owes you an apology." Amara smiled faintly. "No," she said. "The world owes itself a better standard." She looked at the horizon, where the sun dipped behind the golden light of her creation, the kind of light that couldn't be hacked, bought, or silenced. Months had passed since the storm ended. Novagen stood stronger than ever, its name now synonymous with integrity. The world had moved on to new headlines, but for Amara Johnson, the echoes of the war still lingered. She had fought enemies with power, influence, and silence, and won. But victory, she learned, doesn't come without scars. In the quiet hours before dawn, she often sat by her office window overlooking San Francisco Bay. The city lights shimmered like scattered stars, and the hum of the world outside felt distant. She remembered the day she almost gave up, before Novagen. Before the success years ago, she had been a junior engineer at a multinational energy corporation, brilliant, ambitious, invisible. She had ideas that could have saved millions, but every time she spoke, men twice her age and half her understanding talked over her. Once, a senior manager had laughed and said, "You're smart for your kind." That day, she went home and cried in her car for hours. Then she wrote one sentence in her journal. "One day, I'll build something they can't ignore." That sentence became Novagen, and now, as she looked at the world she helped change, she realized it wasn't about being seen anymore. It was about making others visible. When the UN Climate Summit invited her to deliver the keynote address in Geneva, she hesitated at first. She had always preferred action over speeches. But something in her heart told her this was the time to speak, not for herself, but for everyone who had been underestimated, disrespected, or silenced. The hall was massive, rows of leaders, scientists, activists, and cameras from every corner of the planet. When she took the stage, the applause was thunderous. But she didn't smile. Not yet. She stood there quietly, waiting for the noise to fade, and then began to speak. "I was called a servant once. In a boardroom full of men who thought money could define worth. I walked away from $700 million that day, and they called it madness, but I learned something. Every empire built on disrespect eventually collapses under its own arrogance. And every woman who refuses to bow becomes a mirror, showing the world what courage really looks like." The room was silent, hanging on every word. Clean energy isn't just about power grids or solar panels. It's about the kind of power we choose to value, the power of ethics, of humanity, of respect. Because if our future is powered by greed, then it isn't a future worth building. A pause. Her eyes glistened. "I didn't come here to talk about money. I came here to talk about light. The kind that burns quietly in all of us, and the choice we make every day to protect it." When she finished, there was no polite applause. There was a standing ovation, the kind that comes not from admiration, but from awakening. After the speech, she stepped outside into the cold Geneva night. Snow was falling, slow, soft, silent. The city lights blurred in the reflection of the lake. She closed her eyes, breathed deeply, and smiled, not the smile of a victor, but of someone finally at peace. Her assistant approached quietly, holding out a small tablet. "You need to see this," she said. It was a live feed from Kenya, the same village where Novagen's first grid had been built. Children were gathered under the lights, waving flags, chanting her name. One little girl held a cardboard sign that read, "Thank you for giving us light." Amara's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she didn't care about the speeches, the headlines, or the billions. Just that one line, she whispered to herself, "No, little one. Thank you for keeping it burning." As dawn broke over Geneva, the light touched the snow like gold. Somewhere in the world, the sun rose over solar panels that bore her name. Amara Johnson, once dismissed, once insulted, once underestimated, had not just built a company. She had built a legacy, and in that light, her grandmother's words echoed once more, "Don't let anyone buy your silence, baby. Not even for $1 billion. True power isn't what you own, it's what you refuse to give away." Even when the world demands it had been 5 years since the day Amara Johnson stood beneath the Geneva lights and told the world that courage had no price. In those 5 years, the world had changed, not perfectly, not completely, but noticeably. Solar grids powered villages that once lived in darkness. Women across industries rose to leadership with her story as their symbol. Universities taught the Novagen case in ethics. Courses around the world, and Amara, she had become something larger than a CEO. She had become a voice and a mirror, but time, even for icons, doesn't stand still. She was now 43. Her hair carried a few silver strands, soft reminders of the storms she had survived. Her schedule was lighter, her laughter rarer, her silence deeper. She no longer chased power. She guided it. Most mornings, she spent her time at Novagen's new Global Innovation Center in Ghana, a place where young engineers from across Africa worked on clean water systems and affordable solar housing. She called them her lightkeepers. One morning, a young intern approached her, nervous, excited, holding a tablet full of designs. "Ms. Johnson," he said, "I've been working on a model that can bring power to 3 villages using only recycled materials. But I'm not sure if it's good enough." Amara smiled, her eyes kind but steady. "You don't build what's perfect," she said softly. "You build what's needed. Perfection can wait, people can't." The boy nodded, inspired. As he walked away, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope, raw and alive. Later that evening, she sat on the balcony overlooking the vast field of solar panels stretching into the horizon. The African sunset painted the sky in fire and gold. Beside her lay a letter, sealed, unmarked, written in her grandmother's handwriting years ago. She had never opened it. Not after all this time. Her grandmother had passed before Novagen was born. But Amara had kept that letter in every office, every home, every hotel room, a silent promise she was never ready to face. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The letter read, "My sweet Amara, the world will try to tell you who you are. Some will call you too much, others not enough. But remember, God didn't put you here to fit in. He put you here to build something that lasts when noise fades away. If they ever try to break you, don't fight for your name. Fight for your light. Love, Grandma May." Tears slipped quietly down her face. She folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. "I did, Grandma," she whispered. "I fought for the light." A few months later, Novagen celebrated its 10th anniversary. The celebration was global, from New York to Nairobi, from Shanghai to Sao Paulo, but Amara didn't attend the gala. Instead, she visited a small village in Sierra Leone, a place that had just received its first Novagen solar installation. There, she watched children run barefoot under glowing streetlights, their laughter rising into the night like music. One little girl tugged on her sleeve. "Are you the light lady?" she asked. Shyly, Amara laughed, really laughed this time, freely, joyfully. "I suppose I am." The girl handed her a handmade paper lantern. "Then this is for you. So you don't forget us when you go back." Amara took it, eyes shining. "I could never forget you," she said. "You're the reason I started." As night deepened, she placed the lantern on the ground beside the solar lights. The wind flickered through the flame, but it didn't go out. For a long moment, she simply watched it, a small, fragile fire burning against the darkness, alive because someone believed it could be. And for the first time in years, she felt complete, not as the CEO who defied empires, not as the woman who changed headlines, but simply as the girl who once promised her grandmother that she'd fight for the light. When the world finally tells her story, they'll mention the billions, the battles, the fame, but the truth of Amara Johnson's legacy will be simpler, purer, quieter. She didn't just light the world, she taught it how to shine.